Alex, I hope you're doing well. Welcome into the game in T-Town.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's good to talk with you. All right, so over under, have you been able to get on the beach? Have you been able to enjoy the scenery at all?
No, that's been way under so far. I'm hoping to get some time to do that tomorrow, but been very busy with the coaches here the last couple of days.
All right, give me the last couple of days. What is your big takeaway from the boots on the ground there in Sandestin? What has been your biggest takeaway?
Well, I think the biggest issue kind of surprised me yesterday. I didn't know what it was going to be, but the early signing day, that's going to be this new national rule this year, was pretty opposed by the SEC coaches we talked to yesterday and the commissioner. That was a very unpopular. I think there's a lot to it, but each coach kind of found something they do not like about this new signing day, which is going to take place in December. On top of the one in February.
So as you listen to coach after coach after coach, is anybody for the early signing period? I mean, have you heard people for the early signing period that will start this year?
I think some people were able to find positive aspects of it. Small things they liked. But Gus Malzahn today, he spoke today, and he seemed like he was the most on board of anybody that we had talked to, and whether that was just indifference versus having a negative attitude like some people had yesterday, he seemed like he was ready to go and run with this new rule. He likes a lot of that new stuff. Anything that is perceived as new or innovative, I think he gets behind.
SEC coaches give thumbs down to a reckless early signing period. Alex, I'm just curious. Help me, and maybe you're not able to. This is maybe an unanswerable question, but how did we get to early signing period? Was there a potential problem in the late signing period? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out what problems did this new rule solve, and what advantages is really out there. I'm trying to look at it from a fair, unbiased opinion rather than from an SEC angle that we all hear the negative nannies from the SEC. Can you help me with that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways you can sort of look at this, but how it probably started was, there's someone with an agenda where they looked at this and said either we can make more money or this is better for this program or that program, and sort of develop this. It was funny because Commissioner Sankey last night was talking through it with us, and he's like, I just don't know how this happened because there seems to be a lot of negative sentiment toward it, not only in the SEC, but from coaches elsewhere. High school coaches hate it. It's not really good for the student athlete. There's not a lot of new benefits there. It's a bit of a mystery as to how this was so easily put into place. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense, really, across the board.
So is this adjustment when we talk about helping the smaller schools out, when we talk about this early signing period, that maybe the bigger dogs are not able to pick off the late kids? I look at a guy named Joshua Jacobs here, a running back. He would have probably ended up at Wyoming if it hadn't been for the late, now what we're calling late signing period, if that's what we're going to call it. Is this more to help out them than it is to help out the bigger Power 5?
I think maybe you could look at it that way, but that nobody's really looking out for the small schools. These major changes don't happen to help the little guy. I mean, it's all about the big guy here, and I think little schools will. I mean, there might be an advantage to this because they can really, really push a kid now and say, listen, you sign with us in December, or, the offer's off the table. And I think for those kids waiting around for Alabama to call them in January, I think, there will be fewer Joshua Jacobs out there.
Alex Martin-Smith right now, SECCountry.com. You also posted another article yesterday, Nick Saban on Maury Smith. I don't think that's fair. Pick up in that and maybe fill us in for those who may have not heard the audio with Nick Saban talking about Maury Smith and the possible rule there.
Yeah, just a brief recap of last year. Mo Smith was a defensive back for Alabama, and he asked for his release. He wanted to transfer within the conference to Georgia. Nick Saban understood the rule to be that you could not transfer within the conference unless you met all these different criteria, which he did not believe fit the situation. So he continued to reject Mo Smith, and that eventually led to the SEC being forced to make a decision on it, and Alabama sort of being forced to grant him his release and allow him to play at Georgia. And yesterday, without mentioning Mo Smith by name, Nick was asked about that issue of this grad transfer specifically within the conference, and he sort of went off. He spent a lot of his press conference discussing the issue and what's wrong with the rule and how disappointed he is that the rule effectively was bent, and now will sort of potentially open the floodgates to a free agency or something along those lines. That's his fear. But he really kind of dug into that yesterday.
Alex, when you look at it this week, what do you think I know we've got, a couple more days left. They'll hand out some paychecks and everybody will get their money and they'll go back to their respective school. But, what are we going to walk away from this SEC spring meetings as the big takeaway? I know the early signing period's probably dominated the first 24, 36 hours, but will that narrative change?
I think, the coaches are pretty much done today. So there's still going to be decisions that are made, outside of their hands and all that. But I think most of the media and press coverage, these last 2 days were the bulk of it. So I do think that when we look back, this early signing day thing is going to be the biggest issue that you review when looking back at these meetings, because that sort of dominated the conversation yesterday.
Alex, would you think, because I look at the SEC and I look at the power in the Southeastern Conference, is there any way that we might go back on this early signing period when we talk about it? Is this something that they might re-examine next spring and go, maybe we did. Maybe we jumped over a little bit too much. Any way they take this off the table, and maybe next spring we talk about, not the SEC, but as far as these NCAA Rules Committee and oversight panels and all these different things?
I wouldn't bet on next year. I would say maybe 2 or 3 years down the road that's a possibility, because this is going to be something that's going to take a couple of years to see how this works, because a big part of this new rule is that players can take their official visits in April, May, June, and we're already past that point for the most part this year. So that's all going to take effect next spring, and that's probably one of the most controversial aspects of it. So I would say that this will not be really discussed, at length again for at least a couple of years.
Alex, when you look at the SEC, we're 94 days away from the Crimson Tide going on the play field, but I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on the upcoming season. What do you see as a conference as a whole?
Yeah, I think at this juncture, you'd probably be a fool to bet against Alabama in the West. I don't necessarily trust Auburn or LSU to make a serious challenge. I do think across the board the conference is going to be stronger than it was last year. It'd be hard to be at that level of mediocrity again, just up and down. But I look forward to seeing what the East can do, because they've got 3 pretty good teams there, and I hope one of them can step up and present a strong challenge to Bama or Auburn, or whoever shows up in Atlanta on that west side.
Are you buying the dogs in Athens?
I like Georgia. I like the way their schedule sets up, because they do have to go to Notre Dame, but that's a non-con game. It's not going to count against their SEC mark. And then I think they go to Auburn. That's really the only other really, really tough game on their schedule. And I think Smart and his staff are looking at that schedule and saying, we can make some noise here, because they're bringing back a lot of players.
Alex, final couple of questions here. We were just talking with a guest a few minutes ago who brought on in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. He does a radio program over in Jackson, Mississippi, Bo Bounds, who was part of our program. And he made a big comment, and it's something I haven't really thought about going into today. And he made the comment, he said Jalen Hurts would not be in his top 3 in the SEC West. I'm just curious, as you look at the West and look at the quarterback position, would Jalen Hurts make your top 3, or maybe Bo has a argument here?
I think without having to list them all out, I would say definitely. And I think Jalen would easily be in my top 3 in the West, and a big part of that is running the football. He has a very, very special ability to run the ball that a lot of running backs don't even have in this conference, and I think you really can't overlook that. I know he has some work to do throwing the ball, and he really faded toward the end of the year. but he is a freak when he leaves the pocket or makes things happen. Just outside of the norm, and he's only going to get better. I think he's a really, really strong player.
Alex, when you look at it, though, when you see a mobile quarterback, it almost changes your perception of the throwing quarterback. If he's a great runner, sometimes you even, I know I'm guilty of it. When you look at mobile quarterbacks, it just we've become, I guess, started back maybe Michael Vick. When you look at just a running quarterback, I think we all question, his arm as well. It seemed like with mobile quarterbacks, we question sometimes the throwing ability. I know Deshaun Watson went through it with his mobility, extending plays, but you often forget about the simple things that Jalen Hurts brings to the table.
Yeah, I guess the problem is that when you're a quarterback that likes to run the football, it means you're tucking running a lot where you're missing those opportunities to throw the ball, or you kind of lean on running as a crutch. And when you're running, and for 1,000 yards in college as a quarterback, of course you're going to be making some wrong decisions here and there and when to tuck it and when not to. But I think it's a fair question to ask, are you leaning on your running game too much as a quarterback? And Jalen still has a lot to prove throwing the ball. But that I would say that's different from a Vic or a Watson, these NFL first-round types of talent, because Jalen just isn't, I don't think, anywhere near where he needs to be throwing the ball to really join those guys in the throwing conversation yet.
Alex, certainly appreciate your conversation. No doubt, I appreciate grabbing on and jumping on and talking some SEC football. Can you believe it? We're on the back end of this countdown. We're about 92 days away from the rest of the league. So listen. It has been a long offseason in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. As you can imagine, it's almost been like, I say it often, it's been like hosting a funeral, losing the championship game. So it's been a long offseason, and the season cannot get here fast enough.
Yeah, I think Alabama fans can take heart in the fact that whenever that preseason poll drops, Alabama's going to be number one, and they're going to get to play probably number 2, Florida State. They're probably going to be 2 or 3. First game of the season. So you don't have to wait long to sort of get that national title taste out of your mouth.
And if you listen to Nick Saban, he said Florida State should be the number one team.
Yeah.
Good coach talk from Nick Saban yesterday. I like that, though.
That's right. He would love it. If Florida State was number one, he would love that, because it just means he gets to motivate his guys even more.